Scam!
That later. But how is this a lucrative field? Why would anyone go with salt smuggling? Well, okay. Well, the century previous, the 8th century for those who are counting, held the An-Lushan Rebellion, when a military governor rose in rebellion against the Tang dynasty, and less than a decade later, 13 to 36 million people were dead. It was the bloodiest conflict in world history to that point, and if you're looking to be really cool at the next party, is the second bloodiest conflict in history prior to World War I. You're welcome for all the friends you're about to make. The real tragedy in all of this is the smaller tax base, which put the government in a hell of a bind. To raise revenue, they instituted a salt monopoly, along with punishing taxes on the peasantry. Those coupled with famine and drought on a 6 out of 10 on the X's scale caused many peasants to flee their land, and many of those into the burgeoning industry of banditry.
Scam!
Exactly. Huang Chao specifically really liked bandits. He'd failed the examinations that led to a traditional career path, but our little Tony Montana of the 9th century Yayo game took his tons of money and brought all the bandit gangs he could together because he had a hell of a plan. It was extortion.
Scam!
With some light plundering. Huang Chao gathered up all those gangs and boom, rose in rebellion against the emperor. After ravaging the countryside, he guessed that the cash-strapped emperor would whip out the abacus, or Salon pen, and offer him a deal to make him go away, rather than an expensive military campaign. It was such a good idea, like calculus, that several people had it at once, and Huang Chao met one of these guys, Wang Xianzhi, who was, guess what? A smuggler of
Salt!
Yep. And this whole plan went off with a single hitch, but otherwise great. They kicked up enough hay that soon they got a little note from the emperor, probably with some cool stationery, and with an offer. Unfortunately, it was only for Wang Xianzhi.
Boo.
So, Wang Xianzhi thought this was a great offer and was going to take it. Wang Chao was less enthusiastic and kicked off this whole tirade about brotherhood, and then at the end of it punctuated it by decking him. Wang Xianzhi was pretty persuaded by this, and therefore declined the offer, but soon he and Huang Chao had parted ways for reasons we can't even imagine. Unfortunately, once there is no longer a carrot, that means there is but a stick left, aka the Imperial Army. Sure. Wang Xianzhi found this half out the hard way and probably wished he hadn't been so easily persuaded when Imperial troops were sawing his head off just a couple of years later. Yeah, it's going to be one of those. Huang Chao shouldn't have made it either, considering his army looked a little bit more like this. Yeah, just soccer hooligans. If battle erupted betwixt them, it would have looked like all the Sharks and the Jets and the entire cast of the Warriors running headlong into friggin' Delta Force. Needless to say, they would not have won. But lucky for them, the generals had other concerns than Huang Chao and his merry band. Why would this be? Well,
Salt!
No, well, related. It's An-Lushan again, everyone's favorite. The titular shitstarter from the 8th century was a popular and successful general, so the imperial court had been a little wary of popular and successful generals ever since. On more than one occasion, including just a decade or so before this, during the Pontoon Rebellion, which is another good one, a particularly successful or popular general would come to the court in triumph, only to be tortured, exiled, and or executed. So many generals were no longer particularly interested in fulfilling the emperor's immutable will. Some chose not to attack Huang Chao. Others did, but allowed him to escape because they were more concerned with setting up independent bases of power so they'd survive whatever came next. Because you don't need to be a meteorologist to tell which way the friggin' wind is blowing. Even those few loyal ones were often hamstrung by court politicking and pulled back before they could finally defeat him. So, Huang Chao was sent pinballing across China. This is very complicated, and I promise I'm going to simplify it. He was pillaging towns and cities, bouncing off of nominally loyal armies, all the while bribing officials he encountered to remind the emperor all it took was a good enough offer. But none of the offers were good enough. Sometimes they felt like a trap, and sometimes they were just below his asking price, considering he now referred to himself as the Generalissimo who charges heaven. Feel free to roll your eyes at this point. So, we're going to simplify the map here just a second. From there, he heads south, looking to take his bandit horde plundering. And plunder they did, including burning down Guangzhou and killing 120,000 people. Mostly foreign merchants, which is why the emperor was totes chill with it. The imperial accounts actually lament the damage to mulberry groves, and we only know the figure of how many died from Arab accounts. Yeah, we're getting back to salt.
Salt!
The plunder was good, but malaria, way not good. So they went back north, where they defeated one imperial army that was led by a cowardly court appointment, and were defeated by another, but allowed to escape because he didn't really give a shit what Huang Chao did. Which left them in the lower Yangtze River Basin. The golden goose's egg of the empire, y'all. The richest territory in the land that had not been despoiled by An Lushan the century previous. And it was now totally undefended. They found money and food and a boatload of people who thought the uniforms looked sick. By the time they left, they were rich and well supplied, and Huang Chao had 150,000 friends. And there was only one place left to go. Chang'an, the capital. After a couple perfunctory battles against what remained of the imperial army, Huang Chao was at the gates, and the emperor nobly defended them by fleeing in the night to his final loyal hideout in Chengdu, which at this point was an absolute backwater. It was the butt of a joke that had yet to be told. This is a good point, to cut off any Maoist revisionists in the audience, because I know you're out there. Yeah, I see you. I can't see any of you. Huang Chao was never fighting for the good of the people, because one, he killed a whole hell of a lot of them, not the least of which in Chang'an itself, which he and his 150,000 friends plundered the ever-living hell out of when they got there. But he also, when declaring himself the new emperor of the Qi dynasty, although he might have lamented the hopelessly corrupt former regime, he did keep everyone he friggin' could on. So much for draining the swamp. Thanks.
Too soon.
Yeah.
Literally in the swamp.
And we also know that if he had been thinking about the populace, he probably wouldn't have made the tragic mistake that led to his downfall. Because in devastating the countryside, he had now broken all the toys that he was claiming for himself. He didn't, yeah, I know, it's real sad. He couldn't raise more taxes because all them folks was dead. He couldn't put them folks in that army because they was dead. And he couldn't have them get more crops for him for the army that he did have. So that is bad. And even worse, all the generals who'd been ignoring him or letting him get away with quite literal murder were much happier with the now properly neutered former emperor awaiting a deus ex machina in Chengdu than this new asshole. They descended en masse, defeated Huang Chao, and drove him from the capital. He escaped for a while, but was eventually cornered, as they all are, and either committed suicide or was betrayed. 10 years and within spitting distance of where this all started. Unfortunately, this didn't solve anything for the regime. They were still tight on cash, banditry was rampant, the court did nothing but bicker and politic with each other, and the generals only grew more powerful and independent and a lot less willing to hear what the emperor was talking about. And who is this creep, you might ask? It's not Huang Chao, because if you're only at the top for that long, they don't make paintings of you. Yeah. It's like that person you date for a week. They don't make it in the memoir. This guy is Zhu Wen, who, a couple decades later, was the one to finally topple the decrepit Tang dynasty. The Tang emperor actually ironically gave him an honorific name which translates to wholeheartedly loyal. I know, baller. But where did this guy come from? Why in the world, Justin, would you introduce someone on your very last slide? I didn't. He's been here the whole time. What? Because he started out as a smuggler of what?
Salt!
And then turned into a bandit?
Scam!
Yeah. And then became a lieutenant of Huang Chao. Who, yeah, exactly. Who, unlike some, principally the only two other people I've named, had the savvy to bust out the abacus when the chips were down and take the damn deal. So to all those who are more ambitious than smart, I raise a glass.